Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Becoming a Gentleman podcast. My name is Christopher Linkenbach, and I will be your host today. On this podcast, we talk about anything from spirituality to masculinity to conscious dating and relationships, and so much more. Today's episode is going to be entitled NoFap Changed My Life. And I would like to start us off with a little quotation by none other than the magnificent Jordan Peterson himself. Jordan tells us, "It is possible for a young man to see more beautiful nude women in one afternoon than any human being that ever lived before 1950 would have seen in his entire life." That is a very profound statement, and we're going to be diving into a little bit more of why that statement carries so much weight in today's world. I want to sort of structure this by basically walking us through a brief history of pornography to illustrate sort of the points that I'm making, and then sort of using that to elaborate on my own personal experience and my own journey with pornography and masturbation and NoFap and how it has affected me and changed my life. And I want to preface this by first and foremost just saying that I'm not coming from this perspective with a prudish and a holier than thou, and I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live their lives. I actually feel that every individual has a right to choose and to be liberated. And I also think that with that right to do so, you should be educating yourself on what you are consuming, what you are doing, and how those actions are affecting who you are, and are these actions aligning you with your most actualized version of who you are, right? So I think that that is important to sort of illustrate, and I kind of just want to say that my opinion, which is open to criticism, and I would love to discuss this with any of you, is that I do not think that it is a healthy behavior to spend time watching random strangers on the internet fuck. And I think that because it is very, very dopamine filled, and it is very addictive, and it causes a huge emotional depletion afterwards. And it is an exhaust of your sexual energy and your libido that could be used towards other more productive and healthier lifestyle choices. And I'm not saying that pornography does not have benefits such as discovering fetishes or kinks that you have, or diving into maybe some of the shadow work of your sexual desire as well. I'm not saying that there aren't certain ways that it can be utilized, but what I'm saying here is the way that it is used today, with the habituation and the rate at which pornography is consumed, that it is not healthy. So if we were to break it down real quick and go back into 1983, this is when the internet was first created. And it was actually through the uploading and the constant desire and demand for pornography that the internet started expanding so rapidly. So pornography had a huge role to play in the expansion of the internet, which is crazy. And even today, 30% of the information that is stored on the internet is pornography. People like to watch other people having sex. This is a very known fact, and it's actually quite crazy to think that literally pretty much 1/3 of our internet is pornography, right? And that involves the internet that we know from the very top all the way down into the deep web and some of the more illegal and dangerous forms of pornography as well. And so I also want to jump back into the history of our own species, the Homo sapien. We have cave depictions. We have paintings of naked women. There are paintings that cavemen did in prehistoric times that showed naked women, and they were, with voluptuous breasts, right? And so there's always been this desire to express this inner creativity, this inner sexual drive that we have. And we can also see it interplayed through the Italian Renaissance with, the statue of David by Michelangelo, for instance. And to me, the only difference between the statue of David And watching some dude named David on the internet having sex with random people is that the statue of David is more so an honoring of the human body, whereas the watching David have sex on the internet is more so the consumption of the human body, right? So it is not through the intention of creating and honoring man's body in God's own image. It is through the consumption and the addiction and the use, the being used. That's exactly what it is you are using these other individuals to get you off, and it is pleasure seeking, and it is a cycle, let me tell you. And I also want to say that I'm not trying to shame anyone or any of this. This is a very delicate subject, and I'm just trying to express what I feel about it and what I've noticed based off of my own experience and my own research into this subject. And the reason that I want to bring up that the internet was created in 1983 is that is how long that we have basically had access to watching pornography at the rate that it is consumed today. And it really hasn't even been as recent as it's been more recent than 1983, just because the internet it wasn't super popular yet. The popular websites weren't completely up and running at the scale that they are today. So even more recent than that, our brains have not had the time to evolve to the rate of consumption that pornography is being watched today. Even with our parents' generation, it was different. Watching, having a couple of nudie magazines is completely different than having millions of hours of instant access to pornography. And going out and watching, a film, a nudie film back in the day, or a porno, like that was an occasional thing, right? It didn't happen all the time, and there was more so a storyline, and it was more so in a movie format, and that feels more cinematic and more with the intention of art than just having two random people who just met each other 20 minutes before the studio, jacked up on drugs and medication and alcohol in order to even perform, and then just having sex with each other, ramming their bodies into each other as hard as possible for 25 minutes to then finish off with some sort of very intense explosion of, you know where that's going. And so that to me feels way different, and it doesn't feel healthy, just straight up. And the reason I want to say that is, once again, not to shame anyone or anything, or to shame anybody in the porn industry either. I say it because not watching pornography, NoFap, has completely changed my life. It has brought to me a new sense of self. It has given to me a inner sense of confidence, and it has brought to me libido and motivation, and it has brought back confidence to go up and talk to women and to have the energy to create and to go out and to play, and I don't feel as depleted. And I kind of want to dive into real quick sort of my own personal journey with where this has taken me. So basically, as any young curious child, I in middle school was just hormoned up one day and stumbled upon the internet and was just going through random searches on Google. And it was through these random searches that I ended up just kind of peering into pornographic culture. And I ended up looking at some images, and then I started scrolling through some videos, and it was like instantly my brain was just hooked to whatever was happening. And at a subconscious level, my brain was now being programmed to think that whatever these people on the internet were doing is what is known as quote unquote sex. So my first interpretation and my first imprint of sex was actually watching two random people on the internet having sex. And these two people were most likely not in love with each other. They were probably medicated. They probably just met each other. And there's a good chance, and we can dive into this in another episode, which I intend to do, that they could have even been sex slaves. And there is a huge darkness that comes with pornography and the porn industry today. So that also could have existed as well. So what I'm saying here is that as an innocent and naive young boy, I stumbled my way into this, and immediately my brain was filled with hormones and endorphins and testosterone and these huge crazy cycles. And as a young adolescent boy, I mean, you can just imagine where that will take you. But I started developing a habit of this, and it was, pretty much consistent every single day for who knows how long, until pretty much my early college adolescent years. And it was only through finally just sort of hitting a depressive cycle that I knew that something had to happen. And it wasn't actually my intentions or my thinking that this cycle was surrounding my pornography usage. It was just that I knew that something in my life wasn't okay, and I felt out of balance, and I knew that this constant state of depression was not something that was normal. And so there was a lot of things that I actually did to kind of start turning the wheel at this time, but definitely the biggest thing that I did at the time was to take a healthy look at my masturbation and pornography usage. And I, for the first time in college, back like sophomore year, decided to take 1 week off and to just see what happened. I'd done some reading on Reddit, kind of stumbled into the NoFap community, watched a few YouTube videos, and I was like, okay, this is kind of what I'm looking for. This is something that I feel that I haven't had in my life, and I'm ready to jump into this. And so I ended up going that whole week, and I did it that first time around. That whole week, I didn't watch any porn, I didn't masturbate, and at the end of that week, I did feel way better. My testosterone levels were through the roof. I felt energized. I felt confident. I felt clear. I was working out harder. I was more motivated to get up in the mornings. So many beautiful things had happened, and I was hooked pretty much after that. But instantly after that week, I relapsed. And I kind of got back in the cycle of the old habituation, and the old patterns and belief systems started creeping up again. And I ended up trying it again. And I was like, what, this time I'm going to go for a month and see what happens. And I ended up making it about a week and a half that time, and relapsed and was back on the wagon once again. But I'd been kind of playing with this on and off, a couple of weeks here and there, and not getting super serious with it. But then November rolled around. And if any of you are aware of November, there's a No Shave November, but there's also NoFap November as well. And this was the first time that I'd committed to myself. I was like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. I am not going to ejaculate for an entire month, and I just want to see what happens. And it was brutal. And I'm in college. There's a lot going on. We're going out to, social events, and basically, I went that entire month without having any ejaculations, and I felt balanced and calm and composed. And you'll kind of notice that your testosterone levels over that course of that month, they keep rising until about that 2 week mark, and then they kind of drop off and balance out a little bit more. But you feel more motivated and balanced and composed with who you are. And then after that month, I once again relapsed. But that was the first time in my life that I had finally felt like I had a grasp on my habit of masturbation. And it is from that place that I started dabbling with 1 month. Then I went to 3 months. And it eventually got to the place where I'd relapsed and come to a decision in my life that I was done with this cycle. And what I've noticed about the cycle of pornography is that it keeps you trapped in place. Because when your brain thinks that you are having sex, it is going to keep you doing whatever it is in your life at that time to continue to have sex. Our number one objective is to reproduce, straight up. And if our body thinks that we're reproducing, it's going to keep our circadian rhythms and our hormones and everything basically the same, because it thinks that we are doing good, because it thinks that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing if we're constantly getting laid. But if you are deceiving yourself and you're playing video games and you're eating junk food and you're not talking to girls and you're jerking off, well, ultimately that's creating the cycle within yourself that this is how we get to have that release. This is how we get to reproduce. And once you've stopped that, all of a sudden your body doesn't have that same, oh, we're not reproducing right now. All of a sudden that's where the shift can happen. That's where the body's like, oh, we need to kick it into gear and start moving forward. And so it's from that sort of understanding and that decision, that understanding allowed for the decision in my life to come that I'm done with that cycle. And it is a cycle. It's the cycle of both the pleasure and then the shame afterwards. Not only are you addicted to the emotional spike and the crazy dopamine spike, but you also become addicted to those lows as well. It becomes a part of your day and you just fluctuate in and out of that. And I mean, judge for yourself, discern for yourself in your own life what is and what isn't serving you. See what happens after you do engage in these, promiscuous activities, and discern for yourself if you do have a desire to maybe try to go a couple weeks without ejaculating and seeing what happens. But I think also it's healthy to maybe even not necessarily not ejaculate, and really kind of just playing with what works best for you. I think first and foremost, the number one thing is pornography. That is honestly where I think that a lot of it lies. I think that there's some aspects of masturbation with the mental fantasies and whatnot that eventually can become addictive and a bit too much as well. But I think that first and foremost, just cutting out pornography is huge if you are serious about making moves in your lifestyle and getting to where you would like to be. But I think that it is okay to pleasure yourself. It's okay to masturbate. There's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. And there should be no shame involved with touching yourself in any way. And I think that it's okay, but I do not think that it's okay to also watch pornography. And that is me speaking my truth. And I'm open to criticism and hearing what you have to say about that, because I'm honestly curious about what your experiences are in terms of NoFap and in terms of watching pornography. And like I mentioned, porn hasn't been around that long, maybe 30, 35 years at the rate that it's being consumed today. Our brain is not used to what is happening right now. So be very, very cautious about what you are doing with your time and where you are spending it. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Christopher Linkenbach, and that is the summary of today's episode. This is definitely going to be a theme that we dive into plenty more during this podcast, and I would also love to talk to other individuals out there about their own journeys as well. So if you have any desire to speak about this or to connect and talk about this with me personally, privately, or even to come on the podcast and talk about this, I would love to hear your own journey and discover how maybe this has benefited you as well. So thank you all so much, and I'll catch you in the next one, all right? Peace.